I'm Stephen Mifsud. I'm the director of Tactile.
And my name's Steve. I'm the Chief Operations Officer. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. So hopefully you'll be able to see our presentation. Apparently we should have had live captioning. You might be able to see this on the bottom of the screen. The event will be recorded and we will make the slide deck available after the event.
Okay, I established Access in 2004, very briefly. I am the project director for Expo 2020 in Dubai, so I'm in charge of the accessibility there. I'm also the access consultant for various World Heritage sites, including Giant Causeway and the Roman Bath. I'm working on a refurbishment program such as Blackpool Winter Gardens and the Harris in Preston, and also 150 museums.
I joined Direct Access in 2017, so I'm relatively new, but my background is in occupational safety and health, which I did my master's. I spent 2 years in Dubai working with architects in Expo 2020, and I've been part of the examination body for new disability access consultants. So, just briefly, so people who benefit from inclusive design is not just disabled people. So 4 key areas are people with physical impairment, visual impairment, hearing impairment, and who might be neurodiverse. That can range from autism, learning disability, brain injury, and so on. But other people who benefit from inclusive design can be families, perhaps with a young child, the elderly who perhaps maybe have limited mobility, people with temporary injury, pregnant mothers, and people who might be fatigued. All buildings need to be designed to consider all people across the whole spectrum of disability, and also those such as families and temporary injury who don't fit in with the disability category.
I would just like to add there that when you take into account all the people that benefit from inclusive design, that's a significant part of the population.
Thank you. The biggest part of accessibility legislation is the Equality Act, which came out in 2010, which replaced the previous Disability Discrimination Act from 1995. The Act is just the legislation, but the actual standard which people have to follow is the British standard BS8 300, which was updated in 2018 and Part N of building regulation. However, although we have this legislation, health and safety take precedent over the Equality Act and inclusion. And what this has sometimes resulted in disabled people being excluded.
Okay, let's be honest here. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. I think we're completely learning new things here. And especially with the Equality Act and disability access, because health and safety take precedence legally, it's like disabled people have been pushed to one side. So I just one of the reasons why I'm talking about this subject is that I work with Advantage Train, London Underground, Virgin, and so I've been advising on train station design for the past 20 years. It's surreal at the moment, because if you go in a train station and just watch people, you will identify that the psychological mindset of how buildings are working has completely changed. For an instance, especially with accessibility, people are not holding on to handrails anymore. People are going on escalators without grabbing onto anything. People are not sitting down when people use the restroom facility. They're not using grab rail. People are not lingering. They are just going from A to B. So when you take that into account, everything that we've been preaching in accessibility for the past 20 years, it's in question now. So here are some examples, some observations on how the pandemic has impacted on disabled people. All the entrances, a lot of the entrances are closed due to one-way system. Now, in many buildings, only one of the entrances are, say, accessible for wheelchair users, especially in a grade-listed building. Many buildings, such as the Harris Museum in Preston, they will have one accessible entrance, but then because of the pandemic, for health and safety, they shut that to operate a one-way system. Hand sanitizer, yes, we know, we've seen them at high heights and things like that. That could have straightforward. But I'm seeing a lot of hand sanitizers which are white against white background, or more importantly, many hand sanitizers you actually have to pick them up and press, which are the two-hand action, or they're fixed and you have to press them down. Many disabled people don't have that ability. This is something that affects both Steve and I. Communication for somebody with a hearing impairment, we rely so much on lip reading. Everybody's wearing a mask, so when you just say hello, quite easy. But if you're speaking like that, there are no visual clues whatsoever for somebody who lip reads. Also, when I couldn't understand what somebody was saying, I would lean forward to try and get the sound. Many people are backing up and going, whoa, social distance here. Reception area, service area. Now we've all got these glazed screens in place, temporary screens. The problem with those is that they are incredibly reflective. That makes it very difficult to lip read. Typically in architecture, well, I actually have a degree in architecture myself, but I would always taught that the key point needs to have a lot of natural daylight. Reception areas generally have a lot of daylight, and when you put the glazed screens in, it becomes impossible to see what people are saying. Restroom toilet facility. Suddenly, the majority of toilets are being closed again for health and safety because organisations don't have the ability to sanitize every facility. And many of my clients are using disabled toilet as an emergency PPE store, or even to store items to allow more space to allow for social distancing. I think it's time for me. Well, what to do? I apologise. I'll take over. Sorry, I apologise for that. So, as well, a lot of access features, tactile map, they're boarded up, do not touch. Large print accessible material, do not touch. Even if you look at the top left, one of my clients there, the Roman bath, you can't, people with impaired vision obviously do not have the ability to see these artifacts. So they create clay models. These, you can't touch them at the moment. And I'm quite interested in how we're going to move forward from that. Seating, because of social distancing, you're finding that seats are becoming a lot more spread out. For instance, one of my clients here, they have all the standard seats, but yet the disabled seating were not in use for safety. Steve?
Thank you, Stephen. So, what did this mean when we think about standard and gradient? Because there's quite a few out there, not just part-time, which is standard, but also for different specialist areas. The Department of Health have their own recommendations, so do Sport England. But the honest answer is that we don't know. Some of the things that they have said will be redundant. But then over time, we might get something new. It don't really just look of early days for all of us. Tactile dining is just one example. What does it mean when you have a role that people can't touch? So if people can't touch the dining, how can someone with a visual impairment navigate their way around? And then the same goes for the accessible toilet. The toilets are designed so people can use them by touch. So for example, you might have the flush on the toilet. You might have a tap which is use the lever. So does that mean we need to make sure everything is changed so it all works on a sensor basis? So these are the different things that we need to consider. The same with the hand dryer. Most of them are automatic, but then do we dispose of the paper option? So different things we need to think about.
Thank you. The thing is, I think we're trying to make is at the moment, as an access consultant, I'm getting a lot of clients saying, what does this mean? Accessibility is really all about a tactile experience. People need to touch them, people need to grab handrail, people need to grab grab rail, handle, everything that needs to be touched. If you take that away, what does that mean for accessibility? Again, with the tactile signage. For years and years, and in all accessible guidance, it states that you need to have tactile and braille. I think that's redundant now.
So what would you say we would need to think about to replace that tactile signage?
I'm coming to that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So we need to consider what does inclusive design mean after the pandemic? And this is important to think about because we need to ensure that disabled people can still continue to participate in society. Because if you don't have that, you're going to lose employment opportunity. You're going to lose social interaction, community interaction. Families are not going to get together. So as an access consultant, this is one of the most challenging times of my career because I think it's actually one of the most important questions that we're having to consider right now. In education, does this mean we're going to look at how schools are built? Are we just going to have the one accessible entrance? Are we going to get rid of large dining halls? Are we going to use separate halls? As I've got 2 children, the way the primary school runs now is completely different. All the classrooms are in bubbles. Are we going to keep and retain that hygienic mindset going forward? Urban environment. Are we still going to have large open plan urban environment where lots of people can congregate together? Or are we going to encourage people to stay separate? transport. What does this mean? How are people going to hold on to things in carriages? In fact, I'm working with Advantage and Virgin Train, and we're having the discussion of what a pendulum is going to look like in the future. Ledger. At the moment, we are not going to the bar. We're getting table service. And this is actually a good thing for disabled people, because disabled people can find it quite difficult to go to a bar. If you're a wheelchair user, they're too high, generally. If you're unsteady on the feet, you don't have something to hold on to. If you have a hearing impairment, quite often they don't have an induction loop. So what does this mean? Are we going to design round the table service? Tourism, I don't think a huge amount is really going to change, except for in hotels, gyms, restaurants. Community services. Are we still going to have the all-day open facility? How are we still going to have all the signs? Because if you go to your local council building, you will find it's full of tactile and braille. It's full of leaflets everywhere. It's also full of screens that you press to ask for more information. It's also about picking up a telephone to speak to the right department. That is like we're having to go back to square one. Healthcare. That's going to change how care homes run and manage. Hospitals and care homes in particular. Stephen mentioned earlier about the mask, which can be challenging for deaf people to communicate. It's the same with elderly people. They get nervous about change or something new, and then if all of a sudden all the care staff in the home all of a sudden have a mask or shield, then there's that communication. Yes. So some of the design, some of the things that we're picking up on, and how we're going to try and how the pandemic is going to affect the design, some of the things we picked up on, rather than having the hand sanitizer, which are to hand action or prep. I think we're now going to have wireless hand sanitizer that's go into a building. You put your hand underneath and it will just automatically dispense. Same with thermal scanner. Like for instance, Dubai, they have this thermal scanner rather than having to go into a device. And toilet, as an access consultant, we've been talking about making sure all the items are at the right height, making sure that color contrast. If you take a standard toilet, you will go and wash your hand. You will touch the tap, that's one action. Then you will go walk past people and go to the hand dryer or go and get a towel. I think what we're going to start looking at now is actually, this is a good example, the Dyson tap, where everything is combined in one. Water, soap, water, hand dryer in one. That stops people moving in a confined space and enable people to keep up social distancing. In fact, Expo 2020, they are now looking to get rid of all hand dryers and to adopt this system. You asked me about tactile and braille signage. Yeah. Okay. What I believe is going to happen is we're going to move from tactile and braille signage. I can't really see a future in that, to be honest, except for paper tactile map. And one of the issues we've had before the pandemic with tactile and braille sign is, where are they? Where are they positioned? How did somebody with impaired vision actually know that a tactile and braille sign there? They only know if they're completely familiar with the building. And even if they are then familiar with the building, they don't need the tactile and braille signage. Where what I think we're going to have now are something called Navi lanes, where you're probably all very familiar with QR code, which is the black and white barcode. For example, the NHS tracking app. You go to a place, you scan it with your mobile phone. The problem with that is if you have impaired vision, where is that? You have to go right up to it. You have to be quite precise. A good solution is actually the Navi lens, which is the next generation. And that is like the same concept, but in color. So you just pick up the mobile phone and it will automatically scan if you've got one in the desktop. Kellogg have used that. New York Underground Metro have used that. And I think that's the way it's going to go forward. Now, not only just that, the handheld device is such a personal thing. And I think that's going to have more of an involvement in navigation. For instance, people with a hearing impairment, they can then have BSL with caption, audio for people with impaired vision. This is where I think it's answered your question. Handrail, I don't know what's going to happen here, because for the past 20 years, I have been recommending a excessive handrail and falling out with a lot of architects in the process. I put my hand up to that. And what one of our clients are looking at are micro gel systems that automatically spray. For instance, the escalator, this one is in Japan. As the escalator handrail keeps moving, it's actually spraying the disinfectant at the bottom. So the handrail is being constantly cleaned. In terms of general handrail, I don't know. One of my clients for the London Underground, he said he thinks we're going to look more into elbow rails. So doors, door handle require touch, and they are one of the key areas in which contamination can happen. People can with their nose and grab a door handle. We are going to be looking more at sensor door. Now, I don't necessarily mean push pads, because push pads require a physical action. What we're going to say is, do you know how you see the automated bin where you just put your hand up to it and it opens automatically? That is what we're going to say. And actually, some of the people we're working with are installing that technology.
But what can be interesting is that if you have an environment where you have a service dog, whenever it's a guide dog or another kind of assistant dog, some of them are actually trained to manually open doors. So if you need to set a sensor up, can that actually be accessible by a dog? So that's something that you might need to think about.
Yeah, thank you. People with hearing impairment, I think we're going to see a lot more app interaction. We're going to see technology that transcribe what people are saying. We're going to see more use of auxiliary aids, such as induction loop. We're going to see increased, improved management of these facilities as well. We're going to see technology given in sign language. It's really going to make a huge difference. And I think as well, people are actually going to become more aware of the requirement of disabled people with a hearing impairment, because there's so much in the news at the moment about how masks are obstructing communication. People with impaired vision, they do not know how to social distance, neither do the guide dog to a certain extent. If you take somebody with impaired vision or somebody blind into a busy area, that person had no choice but to walk into the crowd with a cane. I think we're going to see a lot more of what we see in Italy, Milan, Dubai, Qatar, some states in the US, which are tactile markings on the floor, which direct people in a straight line. That doesn't just help people with impaired vision, it also tells people who can see that this is a route that somebody with impaired vision will be taking.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope, well, we both hope that you've enjoyed this brief overview of some of the different issues that need to be considered when we move forward with the post-pandemic world. Our contact details are here, both info@accessaudit.com, but also please do feel free to connect both Stephen and myself on LinkedIn, because we do share lots of tidbits and information on a fairly regular basis. We are open to questions if people have any.
Yeah, another thing to bear in mind is we do a lot of accessibility audit, and at the moment we're actually auditing with COVID in mind. So that's over to you, guys. I see a question from Sarah.
Yes.
Asking about technology for lift. Well, a few of the lift manufacturers that we work with, for instance, Stana, they are actually looking at voice-activated lift. So the answer is yes and no. The technology is not quite there, but from what we see, it's going to be there very, very quickly.
Another question from Mick Hodgson there, and Paul.
Whoa. Okay. Yes. Right. Heritage project. Can we give examples of how we manage to tread the line of providing accessibility solution without affecting the historic fabric? That is one heck of a question that put me right on the spot. There's so many different elements of this, because of course many heritage sites are grade listed. Now, this is such a broad question. I could do one example. Many areas are not accessible via step-free access. That's not going to be possible at all, because obviously planning takes precedence over accessibility. So it's about providing alternative means of access. How do you provide that service? For instance, the Harris Museum in Preston, we have the Egyptian balcony on the top floor. No, you will never get step-free access, you will never get a lift up there. So what we're actually working on is creating that experience with technology on a lower accessible floor. Next question.
Okay, that's right. One of the most important things, I think, is you've got a heritage project, is to actually engage with the local disability community, because sometimes they might have something innovative or an idea that might actually work for that particular situation. Because this is something we've done with Blackpool Winter Garden, and we are doing with Giant Causeway.
Yes. And hand swipe movement to open doors. Yes, we are available. We are aware of trials that have been made to do that. I have signed an NDA for a really good one, but if you would be happy to email me, I will also get in touch and see if I can release the detail. But it works in exactly the same way of not having to touch the handle or anything. At the moment, you have automatic doors with sensors. They are problematic because somebody just walks past, they open and you get the wind and cold air, they break. Lights and shadows set them off. Push pads, they require you touch them. This new technology, you just put your hand up to something quite close and it just opened automatically. There's no better way of describing it than a Dunham Mill bin. Okay, the last one. The time to talk to policymakers.
So,
yes, in terms of talking to policymakers, I actually was involved originally in the British Standard B8300 for accessibility, and for instance in rail, I taught for TfL, transport. So yes, but there are lots of different areas of policymakers. So we need to be quite specific. I do agree with you, though, that a lot of urban design solutions are not working for accessibility. Okay.
okay, you've got one more question from Mick there.
Okay, right. You're absolutely right that Virgin are a fantastic brand. I won't lie, they are my favourite client by a long way. They have, obviously, because of the franchise, they've now become Advanti West Coast, but they are still Virgin. Now, one of the projects that we have worked with is the Calm Corner, which is the very first quiet room on the railway network. And it even got a mention from Richard Branson, which was quite good. Now, that is for people on the spectrum, people with autism, people who have anxiety. Now, it's very important to point out that a quiet room is not the same thing as a sensory room. A sensory room is one with like light and effect, not that. Calm Corner was designed as a space where people can just take a minute, charge, and then get on with the journey. Everything was taken into account. Just to give you a few examples, the flooring, which is similar to a wooden laminate, doesn't make that sort of noise, quite soft. The furniture was chosen not to make like scratch noise, minimal scratch noise. The lighting was warm, no flickering, and just at the right temperature. The colours are like green, calming colours, red avoided, which is virgin, that's avoided, yellow is avoided, dark coloured avoider. So if you do get the chance, have a look at the calm corner, and that's a good example of one of the projects we worked on.
I'm not sure if it's actually a queue, so is that queue station, which is where the calm corner is. We are working with the vendor to look at rolling it out to a few other stations. So do keep an eye out. Everyone come and see.
Another thing I'd like to mention are changing places. They are the larger toilet for people with more complex and mobility needs. Because if you take a standard disabled toilet, it doesn't suit everybody. So a change in place is the larger one. The point where with Virgin, we've identified that they can be quite clinical looking. They can look like a medical facility, hospital looking. So we're actually trying to turn these into creative and exciting spaces, one that promote independence. That's another one. Okay.
Then from Ben, it's often about trouble with large spaces and large group gatherings, and whenever we see smaller spaces as a potential solution to this. So, and then it's a balance.
We're not architects, so we don't know how these spaces are going to work. But from an accessibility point of view, this is answering Ben's question. I am concerned because the smaller the spaces are, it makes it quite difficult for people to pass a wheelchair user, and also for a wheelchair user to get that full turn. However, I think it's all going to be about getting the right balance. I think the good thing about a smaller, more compartmentalized space is that it's going to force people to social distance. Whereas in a large space, people misbehave, for lack of a better word. So I don't know. Yeah, okay. All right, Nick, how long have we got? Okay, yes, I can tell you straight away. Pattern. Many designers, I don't want to use the word architect because I might upset people, but let me just say designer. For instance, I've seen urban landscape where you have black, grey, black, grey, black, grey step, which looks like step. And that can make people with autism quite apprehensive, but also people with dementia. If you have excessive patterns on the floor, again, as well, if you take a lot of modern buildings with lots of glass, a lot of reflections there, if you take buildings with use of excessive concrete and hard surfaces with no acoustic panel, these can create a lot of background, and that affects people with autism. There's so many.
I've been in Dubai, and out there, what quite often happens is the blister tactile paving. They quite often install them, but without a drop pad, people don't realise and they just step off and they fall flat.
The thing I want to say. Okay, in your experience, yes, yes, I have to be paused. Yeah, for instance, at the moment, I am involved in the refurbishment of the waiting room at Coventry Station. Now, Coventry, built in the 1950s, 1960s, and they are turning, for instance, their first class lounge into a general waiting room. Now, originally, we're going to have certain ways that the seats were going to work. We're going to have deck. We were going to have a space where people can collaborate and things. Now, that's all on hold. So we're now looking at actually spacing the seats out. We're looking at having the workstation to actually separate people. You're actually looking at having glazed screens in between. So, in short, COVID is quite a new thing, and also in rail, projects tend to drag on for ages. But yes, I am seeing that COVID is impeding accessibility. Yeah. I am always happy to email me, and I can provide more detail.
Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify, it might be, hopefully you can hear me okay, but I've seen numerous stations that have responded to COVID with screens, with less seats, etc. I guess my question was more, have you seen any early stage adopters that have noted the impeding COVID designs upon accessible design and positively responded to that? So has anyone picked up upon these problems, these contradictions almost, of COVID interventions and actually said, hang on, the screens are a problem, for example?
Yeah, to be honest, with railways at the moment, what we've been doing are accessibility audits of the stations while they're quiet, and also being involved in the refurbishment of ticket offices in the waiting room and Coventry Station, also some work at Preston. However, COVID is still very new, so I'm not actually really seeing that much where COVID is going to further impede accessibility, because people are still trying to understand what this means for the future.
What we have been doing is that when we've gone out on site, we try to limit the amount of time that we spend on site and turn to a more, taking more photographs and then writing up reports in the office rather than on site.
Yeah, but another thing we've been looking at is, and I am being asked this question, is wayfinding. What does this mean? Because they are now of the view that they want people to go into the station and leave immediately. Whereas before, the idea was somebody would come, they might grab a coffee, they might use the retail, they might go in the waiting room. Now they actually want people to visit, get on the train and go and get out. And the biggest way that's going to be achieved is by having very clear wayfinding. And at Birmingham International, which is the station where the NEC is, and Birmingham Airport, they are going to trial new wayfinding using beacons. So a key area of the station, that a beacon which will activate an app on a mobile phone. So the mobile phone will say, you are on platform 1. One of the good things with that is that if you have the app on your phone, the beacon can actually be programmed. So if you see toilet, it could say this toilet is out of order, go to this one, and then the phone will navigate you to that particular one. I think one of the issues is we are trying to chase technology, and my fear is that in quite a few of the cases, the technology is not quite there yet, but we're trying to tell it be ready, be there. Voice activation is another one. Yeah.
I actually saw very briefly on the news this morning that that the proportion of people with a smartphone obviously is younger. Personally, the more likely they'll have a smartphone. But what was interesting was only about 45% of disabled people actually have a smartphone, which is the smallest proportion out of any age group.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that they are concerned about. So, but again, the pandemic is a completely new thing. We're just learning everything that we go along.
Exactly. Okay, are there any more questions?
No, I think that's all the questions for now. So once again, thank you very much, both of you. It has been much appreciated.
Thank you.
Paul, do you have any other additional comments to make before we close?
I think that was excellent. Some really good questions there that were answered very well. We'll have this video recording edited and posted online to YouTube, and we'll circulate that throughout our extended networks. We'll also include your contact details should anybody wish to get in contact with you. But yeah, look, thank you very much. And what would be great would be potentially another update talk in maybe 6 months' time. It would be really interesting to see where things have gone.
I am more than happy to share what we've learned. For instance, the doors, the centre opening doors. If you email us, I'm more than happy to go into more detail on those.
That's excellent. I'm sure we'll be in contact soon. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for attending and for sending in your questions.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close there.